Have you ever wondered what truly separates those who live in abundance from those who seem to be constantly struggling against scarcity? Thomas Troward said that the difference lies not in physical effort, but in the mental pattern each person establishes as truth. The wealthy, those who understand the secret, don't think of money as something distant, difficult, or limited. They see it as a natural consequence of an internal state of certainty, and it's precisely this silent conviction that the world seems to call luck. For Troward, the mind is the creative center of all form. Nothing manifests externally that hasn't first been shaped in thought. This means that every bill, every opportunity, every flow of prosperity that comes to you is merely the reflection of a previously accepted mental image. The wealthy understand that thinking is acting on the invisible plane. That's why they care about what they feel, what they say, and especially what they believe is possible. While many ask with doubt, they decide with faith. This is the thought Troward called the established pattern, a calm conviction, without effort, that creates without resistance. It's not fleeting thought, it's a state of consciousness. When someone remains firm in this pattern, the universe responds like a faithful servant. Circumstances, people, and even events organize themselves to confirm the mold that was created. The secret, therefore, lies not in money itself, but in the mind that conceives it. What the wealthy truly hide, or perhaps simply cannot explain, is that prosperity begins when thought stops oscillating between faith and fear. As long as there is doubt, the pattern breaks. When there is tranquil certainty, the law responds. Troward called this spiritual conviction. He said, "Visible action is merely the shadow of a well-formed thought, and it's precisely this principle we'll explore together, because if right thinking creates wealth for some, it can create it for all. What changes is the accepted pattern, and that, fortunately, is entirely in your hands." Thomas Troward affirmed that there is no chance in the manifestation of wealth. What the world calls luck, he called the natural result of a well-established mental pattern. The difference is simple but powerful. Those who understand mental law don't wait for life to change out of mercy. They change themselves until life has no choice but to respond. That's why certain people seem to attract opportunities with ease. They're not being favored. They're simply vibrating at the frequency of certainty. Troward explained that thought is like a living seed. It contains within itself the invisible form of what will become visible. If the seed is fear, scarcity will grow. If it's confidence, prosperity will flourish. But the soil, the mind, must be clean of contradictions. Many claim to desire wealth but nurture within themselves resentment, guilt, and distrust regarding money. This internal conflict blocks the creative flow. The mind asks for one thing and feels another. The result is a cycle of frustration that seems like bad luck. The wealthy, according to Troward, broke this cycle. They learn to think in harmony with the result they desire. They don't ask for prosperity while feeling fear. They don't bless money in the morning and curse it at night. They maintain a single, coherent pattern without noise. And it's this silent coherence that mental law recognizes and reproduces. The law doesn't argue. It executes the mold it's given. So said Troward. True wealth, therefore, doesn't begin with more work, but with disciplined mental work. A clear thought, repeated with serene faith, creates a magnetic field around you. Circumstances, people, and resources are attracted like pieces fitting into a perfect plan. And when this happens, external observers call it luck. But those who know the law smile in silence because they understand that nothing came by chance. Everything came by established pattern. Thomas Troward said that the cause of all things lies in the mind, and visible form is merely its result. When we understand this, money ceases to be a mystery and becomes a faithful mirror of what happens within us. The mind is the field where everything begins. Every idea, every expectation, every emotion creates an invisible mold, and the physical world merely reproduces it. If you see scarcity, first observe the thought that originated it. If you live in abundance, know that it's the reflection of a well-planted conviction. Troward compared thought to an electrical current, neutral by nature, but assuming the form of the device to which it's connected. If connected to faith, it generates prosperity. If connected to fear, it produces limitation. That's why he insisted so much on cultivating a serene conviction, a state of tranquil certainty. free from the anxiety of those who expect immediate results. When the mind rests in the security of a true idea, the law begins to act without resistance. It's the moment when the invisible begins to take form. The common error is trying to change the effect without altering the cause. Many people struggle to correct the external world, increase work hours, change jobs, or save every penny, but forget to transform the mental pattern that governs all actions. Physical effort without inner harmony is like trying to push a locked door. Energy dissipates and the result is exhaustion, not abundance. Real transformation happens when you change the key, and that key is always a new thought, accepted with faith. When Troward spoke about money, he wasn't speaking of figures, he was speaking of consciousness. He said that money is just one of many languages through which the mind translates its belief in value. If you feel you deserve it, it flows. If you doubt, it retracts. Thus, prospering isn't conquering something outside yourself, but allowing the value that already exists within you to find expression. This is what makes mental law so liberating. It places the power to create wealth exactly where it always was, in the thought you choose to sustain. Troward believed that the proofs of mental law weren't in books, but in the lives that transformed when someone changed their pattern of thought. Imagine someone who for years silently repeats, "Money is difficult, nothing works out for me." This phrase, sustained with emotion, becomes a negative prayer, and the law executes it without judgment. But when the person finally decides to think differently, something invisible moves. The same mental field that sustained failure begins to sustain prosperity. The result doesn't delay. This is what happened with one of Troward's students, a simple man who, after losing his job, decided to apply the principles he'd been studying. Every morning, he sat for a few minutes in silence and affirmed, "The intelligence that created me is also the intelligence that provides for me. The flow of abundance recognizes me and reaches me." He didn't make distressed pleas. He simply accepted internally that provision already existed. A few weeks later, a former colleague invited him to a job that paid more than the previous one. Troward said this wasn't a miracle, it was law in action. The man had exchanged the pattern of fear for the pattern of confidence, and since the mind is the cause, the effect could be no other. This subtle but profound change creates a new relationship with money. You stop chasing it and begin to attract it naturally because you no longer vibrate in lack, but in the consciousness that supply is part of universal order. It's the same movement that happens in nature. The tree doesn't beg for the sun. It absorbs it because it knows it's always present. This is the secret Troward wanted everyone to understand. The law responds to recognition, not supplication. Money, as a manifestation of abundance, obeys the same principle. It doesn't come through desperation, it comes through attunement. When thought stops oscillating and rests in confidence, the mind becomes a silent magnet, and the outer world begins to reorganize around this new vibration. According to Thomas Troward, right thinking is that which maintains coherence between belief, feeling, and word. It's easy to say, "I want to prosper," but if within there is doubt or fear, the mind sends contradictory signals. Mental law doesn't distinguish good intentions from emotional contradictions. It simply reproduces what is accepted with conviction. Therefore, true spiritual discipline isn't in long prayers, but in watching over the inner state. Each time you think, feel, and speak in harmony, you create a stable pattern that inevitably manifests. Troward called this coherence, unity of thought. For him, the entire universe responds to unified thought, just as an echo responds to a clear voice in a valley. The problem is that many people live in constant mental noise. They affirm faith, but doubt. They desire, but fear. They give thanks, but soon complain. This oscillation disintegrates the creative pattern and produces uncertain results. Money flows and disappears because the pattern wasn't maintained. The mind is creative, but also precise and impersonal. It returns to man the exact sum of what he believes. The wealthy, in Troward's view, developed the habit of sustaining right thinking until it became natural. They don't think about abundance only in the morning and then plunge into worries in the afternoon. They maintain the same mental tone all the time. This vibrational constancy is the silent secret of prosperity. It's not an exhausting practice, it's a way of being. When the internal state is one of tranquility and certainty, external decisions become inspired, movements are intuitive, and life seems to conspire in your favor. Wealth becomes consequence, not goal. That's why Troward insisted, the mind doesn't create through effort, but through stability. It's when you stop fighting the effect and begin caring for the cause. It's when money ceases to be an escape and transforms into a natural expression of inner harmony. This is the point where prosperity ceases to be a distant promise and becomes a continuous experience, the fruit of the invisible discipline of those who learn to think correctly and remain faithful to the pattern of abundance. Troward said that prosperity isn't measured by how much you accumulate, but by the freedom with which you let it flow. Just as blood must circulate to keep the body alive, money must also move to remain vibrant. When someone holds onto it out of fear, they block their own channel through which abundance could enter. Mental law is precise. What you retain out of fear, fear retains from you. That's why Troward taught that the true sage blesses both the entrance and exit of money. In his lectures, he explained that paying a bill is as sacred as receiving payment. The act of giving isn't loss, it's continuity. When you pay with gratitude, you send the universe the message that you're consciously participating in the circulation of good. Money then recognizes the path and returns multiplied. But when you pay with pain, revolt, or scarcity, you cut your own flow and reinforce the pattern of lack. The energy that accompanies each transaction is the mold the law obeys. One of Troward's favorite examples was of a merchant who, after learning this principle, began to bless every bill that left the register. He'd say softly, "Go and return multiplied. Serve those who need and return to me with joy." In a short time, his store began to prosper unexpectedly. Old customers returned, new ones appeared, and he himself was surprised by the harmony of the business. The money didn't flee, Troward said. It simply recognized the order and returned to its point of origin. This is the true circulation of wealth. Giving with confidence and receiving with humility. Fear paralyzes, faith moves. When you understand that abundance is a flow, you realize there's no possible loss. There's only transformation. And when money is treated as living energy, it feels pleasure in returning. Troward summarized it thus: the law of wealth is a law of circulation. To stop is to die. To flow is to live. Those who learn to let money go with gratitude never again see it as an enemy, but as a friend who always returns with good news. Among the stories that illustrate the power of mind over finances, Troward liked to cite that of Helena, a seamstress who believed she was born to live with little. She repeated phrases inherited from family. "Money isn't for us. Life is struggle. Only cheaters get rich." Each of these thoughts was a seed of limitation. When she encountered Troward's writings, she felt challenged. He said that the mind is the only place where scarcity can exist. Outside it, there's only abundance awaiting form. Helena decided to experiment. Every morning before starting work, she'd close her eyes and say, "The intelligence that governs the universe also governs my life. I accept the flow of prosperity as something natural." It wasn't a plea. It was an affirmation of identity. At first, doubt appeared, but she persisted. 2 weeks later, an old customer returned with a large order and introduced Helena to other people. In 1 month, her income doubled. No magical change, just the law responding to the new mental pattern. Troward explained that the power wasn't in the words, but in the internal state with which they were spoken. Helena had stopped seeing herself as a victim of life and begun seeing herself as a participant in the creative mind. This small shift in perception altered the entire vibration of her mental field. From there, circumstances simply followed the new mold. What was once effort became fluidity. What was fear turned into confidence. Helena's story showed that money isn't conquered, it's recognized. It already exists, potentially everywhere, but only manifests where it finds acceptance. Troward said that the universe is a neutral mirror. It reflects with precision what you believe yourself to be. By changing her belief, Helena changed the reflection, and this is the beauty of the law. It's impersonal, but perfectly just. It privileges no one. It simply responds to those who decide to think in harmony with the creative principle. Troward taught that imagination is the laboratory of the mind, the place where the invisible begins to organize itself toward the visible. For him, to imagine wasn't to daydream, but to create mental molds that universal law reproduces. People's error, he said, is to imagine and doubt at the same time. They light the flame and quickly extinguish it with fear. The law responds to the image maintained with serene conviction, not to agitated desire. That's why Troward recommended the exercise of creative contemplation. Visualizing prosperity already complete, feeling it as present, not as promise. He said the secret wasn't in asking, but in assuming the desired state. When the mind convinces itself that something is real, the universe begins to treat this belief as a command. This is how all manifestations work. Faith, in its most practical definition, is simply the habit of feeling as if it already were. Money then ceases to be a hope and becomes a silent certainty. The person acts differently, speaks differently, and emits a vibration that naturally attracts opportunities compatible with this internal state. For Troward, this practice required delicacy, not effort. He compared imagination to a river. You don't force the water's course, you simply open the channel. When you imagine prosperity with gratitude, you're opening the channel through which abundance can flow. If, however, you imagine with anxiety, you create dams. Spiritual work is removing internal resistances, not pushing results. That's why he warned, avoid haste. Precipitation is fear disguised as action. Nature isn't in a hurry, and yet everything is fulfilled. This is the point where thought transforms into conviction. And conviction is the seal of the law. When the internal pattern stabilizes, the external world has no choice but to obey. Money, opportunities, and ideas flow because there's no longer conflict between what you want and what you feel. Imagination then ceases to be fantasy and becomes an instrument of conscious creation. It's in this state of creative tranquility that Troward said lies the true secret of the wealthy, not in possessions, but in the serenity with which they shape reality. Thomas Troward observed that many desire to prosper but harbor within themselves a silent belief of unworthiness. They want good but feel guilt upon receiving it. This contradiction, according to him, is the most common form of spiritual self-sabotage. The obedient mind reflects what it believes is fair. If the person thinks they don't deserve, the law responds by restricting the flow. That's why Troward said, the universe denies nothing, it simply returns what is granted to it. The blockage is never outside, it's in the intimate feeling of worthiness. This fear of abundance is often born from distorted teachings. We've been conditioned to see money as something impure, dangerous, or incompatible with spirituality. Troward firmly refuted this idea. For him, wealth is simply the form that divine intelligence assumes when it flows freely through us. To reject it is to reject life's own expression. He reminded us that scarcity isn't virtue, it's a symptom of misaligned thinking. Harmony, he said, always manifests as fullness, never as lack. One of his students reported that when he began to prosper, he felt ashamed to earn more than his parents. This feeling caused him to lose clients and opportunities without realizing it. In speaking with Troward, he heard, "You don't offend anyone by being prosperous. You simply demonstrate what's possible." This phrase freed him. He understood that wealth didn't distance him from the spiritual, it aligned him with it. When he accepted this truth, business began to flourish again. The same occurs with anyone who recognizes their natural right to express good. Fear and guilt are like shadows that weaken the mental pattern. They dissipate only with light, the light of recognizing one's own value. Troward taught that mental law is too exact to respond to indecision. Either you accept abundance as part of your divine nature, or the universe will remain neutral. The instant you say from the heart, "I am worthy of the good I seek," the vibration changes, and life begins to correspond. Prosperity ceases to be something you conquer and becomes something you allow. Troward believed that although thought is individual, its vibration creates resonance in all who share it. He said that when many minds unite in the same pattern of faith and recognition, they form an energy field capable of elevating all who participate in it. It's the same law, acting on a larger scale. Just as a thought of fear can contaminate a house, a thought of sincere prosperity can purify the environment and open paths for everyone. That's why genuine abundance is never selfish. It multiplies good all around. In his classes, Troward mentioned examples of communities that flourished when their members learned to think constructively, small groups that gathered to give thanks, visualize good and share victories created without realizing it, a magnetic atmosphere of prosperity. Each person's energy strengthened the others, and limitations seemed to dissolve naturally. The mind is contagious, he said, and the contagion of good is the most powerful antidote against scarcity. To prosper, therefore, is also an act of spiritual service. When someone breaks the pattern of mental poverty, they open an invisible trail that others can follow. One person's success becomes living proof that the law works, awakening faith in those who observe. This is how Troward's teachings spread, not through advertising, but through visible results. Each transformed life inspired another, and the movement grew silently. Prosperity, he said, isn't a solitary conquest, but a melody that the universe plays through those who decide to tune it within themselves. This collective power continues to act today. Every time you bless someone's success, you strengthen your own field. Envy closes doors, gratitude opens windows. Joy for another's good confirms to mental law that you're already vibrating at the same frequency. The universe understands this language and responds with equivalence. Prospering together is the natural path of the law because it recognizes the unity of all things. When one prospers with love, all prosper with them. Thomas Troward said that the first step to creating wealth is to mentally assume the state of one who already possesses it. Before any external evidence, you must feel internally the reality of the desired good. He called this taking possession through thought. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself in perfect financial tranquility. No debt worries you, no bill threatens you. Feel the lightness of this state and allow your entire body to recognize it as true. This sensation is the mold of your new reality. Now visualize money as a luminous flow that moves freely through your life. It enters and exits like breath, constant, natural, effortless. See it coming to you in the form of ideas, opportunities, generous people, and unexpected results. Feel gratitude, not for the promise but for the certainty that this is already happening in planes your eyes don't yet perceive. Troward explained that when the mind maintains itself in this state of silent acceptance, the law begins to transform the invisible into visible. Allow yourself then to affirm softly, I am part of the creative mind. Wealth is the natural expression of my being. All that is good, beautiful, and prosperous flows to me and through me. Repeat these words without hurry, feeling each one. The goal isn't to convince the mind, but to calm it. Faith isn't effort, it's rest. It's in this rest that the law works with most force, because it finds no resistance. When you open your eyes, maintain the feeling. Walk, speak, and act like someone who already lives in this abundance. This coherence is the secret. The universe doesn't respond to fleeting desire, but to the assumed state. Troward taught, form is always faithful to cause. Effect never disobeys the mind that conceives it. By sustaining this state long enough, the external world, obedient, reorganizes itself. Money, opportunities, and circumstances will come, not by luck, but by pattern harmony. Thomas Troward said that the universe is a perfect mirror. It doesn't return what we ask for, but what we are. Money, as part of this order, simply reflects the tone of our mind. If we treat it with fear, it hides. If we bless it, it flourishes. The law makes no moral distinctions. It simply fulfills the vibration we emit. That's why the secret the wealthy know and that Troward revealed is simple. Change yourself, and the world will have no choice but to change with you. Everything else is consequence. When we understand this, life becomes a constant dialogue with abundance. Each thought is a seed. Each feeling is the soil where it germinates. Prospering ceases to be a race and transforms into a state of harmony. You begin to perceive that the universe was never against you. It was simply awaiting the moment when your mind would be ready to receive. And that moment is now. Because each instant you choose to trust, a new reality begins to form, invisible but already alive. Before closing, make one last reflection. If money were a friend, how would it feel entering your home? Welcome and honored, or suspicious and rejected? The answer to this question shows the pattern you maintain. If you wish to transform it, begin today. Bless what you have, give thanks for what arrives, and let go with love what departs. This is the language the law understands. It's the thought the wealthy sustain, not of possession, but of confidence. And if this message touched your heart, remember to return this energy. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear these words, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with us. Here, we continue exploring the teachings of Thomas Troward and other masters of prosperity, because the more minds awaken to mental law, the more abundant the world becomes. May your mind be the temple of wealth, and may wealth become the living expression of your